This past Saturday, I interviewed Matt Jameson. We speak about the IDW, or the intellectual dark web, and his critiques on the group. Now, the reason why I asked to interview Matt is because I actually disagree with him on quite a few of his critiques. However, I liked the way he articulated his ideas on Twitter, and I wanted to hear him out and to understand where he was coming from. Now, since Saturday, when I interviewed him, he's been tweeting quite a few things regarding the IDW, and I expedited the editing of this video because I thought it could shed some light on his perspective. So I won't keep you any further, and here is my interview. Hi, Matt.
Hey, Andrea.
Thanks for chatting with me today. Okay, so I'm horrible with small talk, so I'm going to just dive right in. Okay, so the reason why I asked you to chat was because the first time, I think I saw you about a month or so ago, maybe longer, you were talking about, like, you were criticizing, I think, the intellectual dark web or something. And I was like, but wait, why? And
It's a good guess.
yeah, and so I was just it was like, I've never seen such words articulated. So, I mean, okay, but I had seen a few, like, Reuben hate, I guess. You know, but I was like, oh, you silly people. I don't know. I just dismissed that. And then, but you were a little bit more specific. And so that's why I was like, oh, I mean, I'm still like an IDW girl, I must say.
Mhm.
But I thought it was interesting, the things you were saying. So what is it, like, I don't know if you remember specifically what you were talking about, but like, you have probably an idea. What is it about the intellectual dark web that has you, I guess, frustrated or perturbed?
Yeah, I mean, people who watch videos probably know a lot about it, right? But if we want to kind of start with what it is, right?
Yeah.
It's this somewhat connected group of public intellectuals.
Mm-hmm.
I think of it as being started by Eric Weinstein and Dave Rubin.
Mm-hmm.
I guess people can disagree about that. Eric was on Sam Harris's podcast in like January 2018. And I think that's maybe where he first dropped the name. And then that Barry Weiss piece came out in like May or something of 2018. So it's like
with all the pictures of them in the shrubbery. Yeah.
yeah. The shrubbery.
Mm-hmm.
And so my problem with it is it kind of is. Dave Rubin is sort of the foil for it.
Okay.
Dave Rubin sort of exploded onto the internet. He was part of Aura, which is like Larry King owned some sort of media venture. Mm-hmm. And so this is like maybe early 2016 or late 2015. I'm not exactly sure. And, he's doing all these direct messages where he's like earnestly staring at the camera and he's like, we got to have less tribalism in politics. It's like he's talking a lot about epistemology. He's talking about like admitting when you're wrong. He's talking about not straw manning people. He's talking about principles of charity and steel manning and all. And I'm like, this is awesome. Like, great. Somebody's talking about this stuff, wants to bring it forward in like a nonpartisan kind of way. And so I started watching his show, and then his show became the Rubin Report. Like very soon after that, he built his set and he got his YouTube channel and all that stuff. And then he re-rolled it out with Sam Harris as the first episode. So it's like, okay, we're serious about this, right? Because Sam's on, he's kind of blessing it.
He's giving his atheist blessing.
Yeah. is going to this, and so that all started out really good. So a lot of us got really excited about it. And then this very abrupt, weird thing happened as we went from the primaries to the general election. So when Hillary wins, and now she's going up against Trump. And I remember like very specifically one day, it was after the first general debate. It was like August of 2016. Dave does like a live stream. And he comes on, and every single thing he's saying is like the Trump apologist argument just out of the blue. It's like he is fully in the bag for Trump in this way that I don't really understand. And it was like this turning point where I said, what happened there? What happened in the couple weeks since I'd last heard him say something? It was like a totally different person. And then sort of slowly it's become this further sliding, toward the right, the lip service to the left. I don't know if I'm pointing to the left or the right, whatever. Right.
You're opposite, I think. Yeah.
Supposed to be.
Yeah.
The lip service to the left is like quieter and quieter. And so right as this is getting really bad with him, the IDW is founded or something. And it starts off, all of their tweets have like 9 different people mentioned in it. Like they're like marketing each other like really hardcore. And,
okay. See, I'm new to Twitter though. Like I didn't see that, and I don't see that necessarily. Like sometimes Brett and Eric retweet each other, which is I kind of think kind of cute because they're brothers. But other than that,
there's an extent to it. I mean, who doesn't do that with people that they like, right? Or people that believe the same things as you believe. But it was so very concentrated, and then people started joining the group. Like Jordan Peterson blew up, and so he became part of the group. Ben Shapiro kind of inexplicably became part of the group.
Well, he was on the Sam Harris episode that Eric coined the term, I think.
Oh, was he?
Yeah.
Well, maybe he then. I don't know. Maybe
it was one of Sam Harris's one that he did in front of a live audience. And so is Eric, and because I remember I specifically found it because I wanted to find out the origins of the name. So maybe that's why Ben is.
So that's kind of the origin of the group, and I mean it's a loose organization to some people. It's maybe not to others. We can get into that stuff. I had heard Eric. It was an early Joe Rogan with him. He's been on it at least twice now. It wasn't the most recent one. He was talking about something these meetings he used to go to in Silicon Valley where they would talk about, I think he called it like Game 2.0 or something 2.0, where they were talking about sort of like rolling out a new version of society or something. And I was thinking about that, and I was like, what is going on with that? What is he trying? What institutions does he want to get rid of? What's the end goal here, right? And the more I've sort of observed them, the more I don't really understand what their goals are, and I'm disappointed with this sort of corporate marketing co-op kind of approach to anti-tribalism, to contrarianism, and to being a public intellectual. It's like they're extremely popular in this space. Like you go on YouTube, and I know some of YouTube's algorithm is like whatever I've watched or you've watched, but you just let it run for a while, and you're in IDW territory in like 20 minutes. They're extremely popular, and I think that they ought to feel a lot more responsibility than they show for the kinds of following that they are attracting and the kinds of people that they're associating with, and the kinds of ideas that they're putting out there. And if they're going to kind of dominate the public intellectual space, which at least on Twitter, it feels like that's sort of what they're doing, then we need to start holding them more accountable.
Okay. So from the perspective of a more, I guess, latecomer, I guess, to, because I mean, not late, but mid, because it was through Jordan Peterson that I discovered Dave, and then Joe Rogan and looked up the different intellectuals and, found out about them. And then especially, I guess, with what happened with Brett at Evergreen, and, that's been going around a lot with the documentary coming out, talking about, so they point out, also with like James and Heather and Helen and Peter with their grievance studies thing as well. They're kind of coupled in there with them, and it seems like what they're pointing out is really important things in the academy in the far left. And yes, they don't talk about the far right, and that's something we can talk about later, but at this point in time, it seems like their space is the academy, and the academy is drifting farther left in how it looks norms wise. It might not be what it is, but how it looks. So to me, it feels like they're pointing out they have good points that need to be spoken about, I guess. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, and sometimes they do.
Yeah.
There's certainly a lack of heterodoxy in the academy, and it's almost completely shaded towards the left.
Uh-huh.
What I don't see from them is that there are really any norms that they're seeking to uphold. Like I
Okay.
see a very similar sort of burn it down mentality toward the academy and toward the mainstream media as Trump has, frankly. There's obviously a lot of differences between them and Trump. And anytime we're talking about the IDW, there's probably going to be one or two members that are kind of an exception to whatever we talked about. Sam Harris is often the exception to what we're talking about.
Okay.
But turning everything into this like shit posting, meme heavy, very, very Twitter, very, very online way of critiquing these things, it feels like they just want to burn them down, and I don't really understand what they want to replace it with. Like there was a Twitter exchange I saw today, and you know it was like largely joking, I'm sure, but somebody was telling Claire Lemon like, we need to start a Quillette University after the other universities are gone, and she's like, yeah, and it's like, what would that even be? What would that look like? I mean, I've heard Jordan Peterson talking about how he's working with some people on some stuff like that. It just feels like they want to replace all of our current institutions with like right-leaning conspiracy theorist YouTuber types.
Okay. I don't think so.
Yeah, okay. Like, tell me what's bad about that.
Okay, no, okay, because you're like, okay, you had me up until like the replace them with what?
Yeah.
And I don't think it's the right-leaning YouTubers, because I don't like the right-leaning YouTubers are provocateur kind of idiots, idiots, like whatever,
well,
you know, like they're not well, they don't have any academic backgrounds though to be able to teach, so they wouldn't be. So realistically, if they started an actual, I mean, I don't know if it'd be online or bricks and mortar university. I mean, they're all professors. There would be nothing wrong with that if they started their own university, but it wasn't. But they each taught in their respective fields. I mean, so I get that sometimes there's criticism for them going out of their field, but if they stick to, you know, like if Eric does math and then you know, Brett does evolutionary biology and Jordan does
10 of them could do
psychology.
That would be a very robust department.
And and then isn't Ben Shapiro a lawyer, so he could do the law?
Oh God. Is this idea falling apart as you're explaining how this school and what Tim Pool will teach journalism?
So. I'm happy with it.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, think of it like this. Like, people are kind of angry this week from the right, and I've criticized this too. Some of these adjunct professors with NYU J School who are, like Talia Levin is one. I think Lauren Duca has a class. It's these people that are very hard left, very anti-right, and they're getting really, I mean, an adjunct professorship isn't a super prestigious thing, but NYU is a prestigious school, and they're like 28 or however old they are, and they're the people that are teaching this new type of journalism, which is very much about, well, everyone has an ideology, so I guess I'll just go with mine, as opposed to sort of, you know, trying to report facts and actually have like strong epistemology. And it's like, I feel like that's sort of that's a reflection on the left of what the IDW is doing wrong on the right. Like their newest darling, I guess, is Tim Pool. You know, he's kind of an independent journalist type who just so happens to think, you know, Gab is fine and have these like sort of right tendencies, but still kind of play that game where you say you're on the left. And, you know, if I told you, like, what will the next IDW member be, your response would probably be that they're going to have those characteristics. And I just want to see more free thought within the IDW. You know, like,
so like what?
Well, more heterodoxy within the IDW. So one of the things, and this sounds a little backwards, but so give me a second. It's like they always talk about theory and they never talk about actual things that are happening.
And
And that
I've heard
sounds,
them say that is one of the things
yeah.
they need to work on is, okay, well, what do we do? So
Oh,
I've heard
oh,
that. I have, like,
good.
what can we do other than tell people to stop hiding what they actually think and being honest and having conversations? Like, that's kind of the call to
Yeah,
be, don't be afraid to be, if you're centrist or even conservative and you live, on the coasts, be
yeah,
honest about, well, that's where the most population is.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
I'm
yeah.
guessing. So there's, I mean, I know I'm in Canada, but like I do have an idea of what
Yeah,
the population is for the
sure.
states. So I think that they do understand that they're not. I think I've heard like Dave say this, and maybe I think I've heard a couple of them say that. Like, what's the answer then? What do we actually put into practice? And they're like, we're working on that. And that's supposed to be this year.
Oh, this year we're. Okay, is that going to get rolled out right when the Patreon clone gets rolled out?
I'm not part of them. I just kind
Yeah.
of believe in them. I
Well,
do.
the thing is, like, we all move through these phases, right? Like, I believed in them for a while when I first heard about them. I believed in Christopher Hitchens back.
A lot
I
of people
guess I
still
was,
do, even though he's
well,
passed on.
yeah,
But
yeah. And that's part of the thing is that this idea that torch, whatever that is, the curmudgeonly brilliant contrarian torch,
mm-hmm.
that these are the people, like this is what we're doing now, like Dave Rubin. um we got to be like, we have to keep some of these norms instead of just breaking everything down, and the ones that matter a lot to me are those epistemic ones, like being charitable to your opponent in a discussion, and Dave Rubin especially, he has a totally different intellectual outlook towards the right and the left. And I get it if someone says, look, the academy, I think it's crazy to say that the left has all the power right now when you have Donald Trump in office. Um,
Well,
but
the media though, like
yeah,
there's a different type of power.
there is, at least the sort of TV media, but Fox News has a pretty firm hold on a lot of the right,
That's
and a
true.
lot of the new YouTube media clearly has a pretty firm hold on the right. But I don't understand how any of that translates to every time something bad comes out of the left, we freak out and dunk on them, and then every time something bad comes out on the right, we ignore it, or we soft pedal it, or we go off
Okay.
and for the weekend. Like, I don't know why we have to have different standards, and I think it's fair at a certain point, and we can talk about how fair guilt by association is and all that stuff, because
Adjacent,
it's a good
like
thing.
alt-right adjacent. No.
Well, right, yeah, and I've thought a lot about that, and I kind of don't know what I think about that. Yeah, it's certainly unfair. There's a point at which it's unfair. It's unfair to say Jordan Peterson is responsible for the Christchurch shooting. I mean, that's ridiculously
Mm-hmm.
crazy, and banning his book is ridiculous too.
Mm-hmm.
Although I don't know what's going on the ground in New Zealand. So if you have to ban someone's book for a month in order to keep them from burning down your bookstore, maybe you have to do that. But I don't know what's going on there.
Yeah, I
I'm
don't know, but
not going to speculate. But you know that's one thing where, yeah, that's not a fair type of guilt by association. But we have to start looking at this at some point and say, all right, um, every one of your like every one of these new things, like look at the Patreon thing where it's like, oh, Sargon of Akkad got kicked off of Patreon.
mm-hmm.
And instead of just being like, all right, like this is as good a time as any, let's have a referendum on Patreon. We can't have them deciding based on political beliefs who gets access to funding that way.
Mm-hmm.
It's always like, well, I don't really know much about Sargon, but it seems like he didn't do anything. It seems like, and Sargon's been on Dave Rubin's show, and there's always this kind of like, let's make sure that we're still friendly with the Sargon fans, right? Let's, I don't really know much about him. Well, it's sort of your job to know about him. And it's so easy to say, I don't know much about this guy, but this But I do know that this was an unfair political based thing. I don't know how they're always so certain about that, but never certain about someone being on the right or not. You know, it's if the left can be bad about calling people fascist or Nazis, whatever you want to call it, like the rhetoric is way out of hand. But people using the rhetoric wrong doesn't erode the idea. It doesn't erode the fact that, you know, if you are carrying water for the right all the time, that there's maybe something to that. And, you know, when you look at some of the funding that we know about, where you've got these Koch Industries funded behind Dave Rubin or PragerU. There are some other sources of funding that I could speculate on, but I don't know too far down that. But you know, they're all at best libertarian, at worst on this toward the right, and you know, it's one of those things that might explain this abrupt shift that happened with Dave Rubin, where you know, it really sounds like you're trying to convert people to the right. It really sounds like you're rooting for the right to win. I don't know how you can look at the way they are and think that they're really just trying to be impartial, you know? And that's where what I want to do is just de-escalate this. Like, it seems like everyone's arguing about what institutions should we burn down, right? Like, should we burn down the media? Should we, like, I don't know how much you hear about what we're talking about here, but the left is like, should we get rid of the Electoral College?
Yeah,
should we
I
let
heard
60 girls vote? Should we have 20 Supreme Court justices instead of 9? And like, we're sort of in this time, this very specific like Trump time, where policy, and it really stinks, but policy doesn't really matter right now. It's almost like we're on hold and we're just trying to decide what is our methodology, like what is our vision for how we're going to go on. And it feels like everyone wants to just race to the bottom. You know, let's just ride Twitter all the way down. No more professionalism, no more anything. Let's just meme ourselves to death, and then we'll like rise up out of the ashes or something, and we'll have this something better.
But I like the memes.
Yeah. You do.
I kind of think they're funny. Like you mean when they put like different people's heads on?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're funny.
Well, I mean, I'm not advocating for like a humorless society without memes, but I read a book that I really thought was interesting recently. It's called "Amusing Ourselves to Death" by Neil Postman.
Oh, okay.
And Neil Postman, do you know about him?
I've heard of the book.
Yeah, he's one of those media theorists. Him and Marshall McLuhan. Marshall McLuhan is the media is the message guy, and Neil Postman took that and made it the media is the metaphor, and it can get a little confusing with the verbiage. But you know, the idea is that book was about TV. I think it was from the 80s, and he was talking about how television was itself as a medium changing the way that we interact with each other. And it's sort of like that's such a starker issue with Twitter and social media, but very few people, and there's some people, but very few people are really looking at how this is changing the way that we interact. I don't think it's a coincidence that memes came about at this time that we only had at the beginning 140 characters to talk to each other, now 280. It just, at a certain point, it changes our communication, and then that changes sort of the way that we think. You know, we don't have nuance in the way that we talk because Twitter's kind of tough for nuance, right? I mean, you can thread something all the way down, but it's not super easy. And when we stop communicating with nuance, we actually stop thinking with nuance. And so part of my worry is that we're just kind of getting marched toward this future where nobody's serious anymore in the ways that we need them to be, in the sense of being professional, being nuanced, being considered thinkers. And that's sort of happening on both sides of everything. You know, you look at all the new members of Congress on either side. It's like our entire government has become shit posters. What's happening? You know? Marco Rubio, I don't know if you saw that side-to-side tweet that he had of Gaddafi when he was alive, and then Gaddafi as he was being marched through the streets of Libya.
I didn't see that, no.
And it was just so shocking. It was like, oh my gosh, and it was meant as some kind of threat to Bolsonaro, I guess, or I don't know. I could have that slightly wrong, but it was just this sort of newfound tolerance that we have for a super coarse and harsh kind of and ironic and nihilist and ridiculous kind of communication. You just kind of look around and we've got the meme president, we've got the reality TV president, to go back to Postman. And I feel like to some extent the social media culture is sort of the water we're swimming in and we don't even realize we're swimming in it, and it's having these really awful effects on us. I mean, I'm not the first person to say these things, but where that sort of circles back and becomes an IDW criticism is that there's way too much sort of memeing and LOL and all that, you know, like 4chan adjacent, if not alt-right adjacent, kind of like way of talking about these things, you know. Like I saw Claire again. She was the Southern Poverty Law Center, you know, is kind of going down in flames because this new generation on the left is clashing with the older generation that was more just based on civil rights. It's like we're seeing CLU. And so they're having this problem. I don't know. It's sort of ongoing, but it looks like the original president or something is in trouble with the younger people. It's like you just respond to that with like an emoji of popcorn because it's just so funny to just watch everything burn. You know, it's.
Oh, well, I mean, I did write surprise, surprise. Because I was surprised. Like I wrote that.
Like I haven't done that too, right? I mean, there's basically nothing I'm saying to you that I haven't done to some extent.
Okay.
It's just I try to have these more lucid moments where I'm like, I should really start doing that less often. But like, that's the thing. Twitter itself makes us want to do that. I mean, there's a button, and I'm pronouncing this GIF intentionally. Deal with it.
Yeah.
There's a GIF button. I'm old school. That's what we used to call it. There's
no, it's okay. Is it GIF? Because I saw this today. I thought it was GIF.
I know. Well, we've lost. So us old people.
I said GIF until I was told by my husband, oh, it's pronounced GIF. So I was like, oh, okay. And so I switched because I just thought I was wrong.
This is the important part of this video, okay?
Okay, everyone, pay attention. I will highlight.
I'm like only half kidding. No, the guy who invented them said it was GIF, but what he invented, it was just kind of like a smaller version of an image file. Like when a GIF came up on a website, you were like, oh, it's going to be like a thumbnail or something, right? Oh. And now they've become animated all the time. It's like basically all they are. And everyone has just kind of decided it's GIF, even though the guy who invented them said it's not. And
culture.
If you say GIF, then they'll be like, they'll post a picture of a giraffe and say, oh, is it giraffic interface format? And so that's your husband. Yeah, he giraffed you on it, so that's fine.
But like,
but like that button being on every tweet, just sitting right there, like, why don't you just make this a GIF instead? Just do it. It's really tantalizing.
Because I just joined Twitter in 2018.
Yeah.
June.
I know, you're so innocent. Yeah.
but I'm just like, I've never used GIFs because I thought they were so stupid. But then I was like,
and now I do sometimes.
And I'm like, I'm gonna find the right one. Like, you know, my favorite one lately is the shame lady from Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
Shame.
Like, well, that's kind of funny because people use that, and then have you seen these like weird campus left protests where they actually chant shame like that? And they get totally seriously?
Oh, it's horrible. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh no. I'm contributing.
That's like a horseshoe. That one's good.
Okay. Well, see, I'm trying to think. So I get the idea of, because I like making things lighter because sometimes it can be so intense on Twitter though. Like, so when I see something funny that makes me laugh, amidst all the Mueller report, it's out, like people freaking out, and then something was funny and I laughed and I was like, yay, something that was a nice light break. Like, you know?
It's a tough balance because, you know, I've been online forever. I mean, I first got online
for 30 years. That's how old the internet is.
In the mid 90s. Yeah. I mean, when I was in high school, and I've always noticed though that there's this tendency toward this certain kind of ironic nihilism online, right? And that's where you get to this notion of what is sort of harmless trolling and what is the real thing. And we're really being tested now what the difference is, because in the wake of this massacre in New Zealand, that was basically like a meme came to life and started murdering people. I mean, that's why I was extremely affected by it, because it was so online, like with the capital O. It was just like the guy saying subscribe to PewDiePie like on the video.
See, I didn't actually want to watch any of it, so I
didn't
don't
either.
know. So, but like how? Okay, so he literally said that.
That is my understanding.
Okay.
Yeah, and I haven't seen anyone dispute that. I won't watch the video. I just can't do that kind of stuff.
Yeah. But you read the manifesto, though?
I read a lot of it.
Okay.
It's like 73 pages. Yeah.
Okay. Well, you know how to read paperwork since you're a lawyer, so you know how to get through
I've
it.
seen briefs that were worse written than that manifesto. I mean, the ideas are terrible, but the sentence structure is like, I mean, the guy
perfect.
knew how to write.
Yeah,
a lot of those manifestos, they just copy and paste all kinds of crazy stuff, but this one.
Well, and that's just how well thought out it was. Yeah, so, okay, so that's how well thought out it was, that he, like, wrote it well, I guess, and wanted it to be his I guess, opus leaving this world. I don't imagine he expected to get out alive. He did, though, right?
He's alive? Yeah, he did. He addressed that in there, like everything else, and he was like, I might not, but I hope I live. Yeah, he's under arrest and in incarceration, but
okay, so let's talk about that. Okay, because he also talked about Candace Owens.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is where I kind of see some figures that you're describing, why I kind of think that they're different from people who are members of the IDW, because I've seen, because I kind of watch all their stuff, all their Joe Rogan stuff, and more or less most of the most interviews that they're on, and see their Twitter lives, and they do seem, at least most of them seem quite genuine in this is how they actually are, and they're not putting on a face. And I particularly the ones who are like actually just were professors, like with Candace Owens. I mean, Eric said literally she's different off camera than on. And I actually do believe Eric. I actually think that's the thing. I believe what Eric says, because I think he actually is just who he is. So I do trust what he says. But he says that, oh, here's the thing. This is her job. That's why she acts this, that, or the other about something else. I think that she said something about how she related Nazis to socialists in a way to make globalism look bad and nationalism actually look good. So that was what he was referring to in that situation. But with her being cited now, I can see what you mean, and I don't really think I think she just incites division in what she tweets and what she talks about. All she does is she's a giant reaction machine. So from what I see, so she was listed, right, like as part of why the shooter did what he did.
She was. Let me go back to what you're saying about Eric talking about how she's different in private. So my question is just, what does that matter to us?
Okay.
He did the same exact thing with Tucker Carlson. What I know Tucker Carlson, and he told me I should go on his show and tell me that Fox News was crap on the show, and he's a nicer guy. Okay, so if I'm never going to meet Candace Owens, and I'm never going to meet Tucker Carlson, and I don't get to be at the private dinners where apparently everyone is like heterodox and circumspect and friendly and whatever, why do I care? And my sort of follow-up is like, so who are the people that he's saying that about? Why is it always Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson? It's not James Gunn. It's not whoever on the left. Now, I mean, it's because they don't run in the circles and they don't know each other, fair enough. But this idea that the fact that someone is purposefully divisive as a fake persona
Mm-hmm.
is supposed to absolve their behavior? Like, isn't that kind of worse? Like, aren't you kind of saying that's just like a culture war profiteer who's just trying to incite us further? I don't understand that argument about how someone being a nice person at the private dinner should make it okay that they said on a public radio station that I think it was Iraqis were primitive monkeys, like Tucker Carlson said that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand the connection, and so it's hard for me not to look at that and say, Eric, what are you doing? Why? Which I did say to him. I
Mm-hmm.
tweeted to him, what are you doing?
Did he write you back?
No, he didn't. He does sometimes. Like Eric is a smart guy. I think he's an earnest, genuine guy. I think he's just a little bit. I don't naive is. I can't say someone that much smarter than me is naive. It doesn't really make sense.
No, I know he's
But-
so smart.
he's-
No, he's giving people the benefit of the doubt. It seems like maybe you think too much.
Well, I think and I think that part of the problem is we don't really know what's happening behind the scenes.
Right.
I think when, he's Peter Thiel's, whatever it is, head of finance or whatever for Thiel Capital. I mean, he is connected.
Yeah.
And Peter Thiel is, I mean, you want to know a conspiracy theory that's actually real? Peter Thiel conspired to take down Gawker by secretly funding that Hulk Hogan lawsuit. And it's actually a great book called Conspiracy by Ryan Holiday. It's awesome.
Oh, okay. I haven't heard of that.
Yeah, it's like a legit, like sometimes conspiracies exist.
Yes,
Sometimes,
I know. This is because the theories give
Yes.
the true conspiracies a bad rap. Yeah.
So this idea that, okay, I don't know what's going on. Like he said that he was in the meeting with Candace Owens and Kanye.
Mm-hmm.
And I've heard some stuff about how he played some role in Kanye's little like heel turn or MAGA turn or whatever it was for a while. And so, thinking about that, it's like, well, what was the goal there? Because what came out of it was Kanye flirted with Trump for a while and praised Candace, and then what?
Well, Kim got that person released from the presidential pardon for that person. I can't remember the name.
Was Eric involved in that?
No. I'm just saying Kim being part of the being married to Kanye. Maybe
that's just like the policy hero of
maybe that's what they were trying to do. They're like, we want to get this person pardoned, and we're gonna make
that was good.
I'm making that up. I just made it up. I don't know if that's actually, but I don't know. I
don't think it's related to IDW, but I could be wrong.
No, I don't know. I remember that it was kind of like amazing that Kim Kardashian got someone.
Yes.
It was drug charges or something, and she got them pardoned, and I was like,
as far as I know, it was a really good thing.
Yeah, I was like, wow, the changes. I don't know, maybe that was part of why they wanted to be in Trump's good graces. I don't know. I don't know.
That might be a stretch, but
I'm just giving the generous way of looking at it.
Possible. But so you mentioned how Candace was in that manifesto.
Yes.
So
yeah.
That's a really hard issue. What that means. Like, someone on the hard left is like, Candace is responsible for this. Someone on the right, or even the middle, or even maybe part of the left is like, that guy was just trolling in the manifesto, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's what Eric said too. He defended Candace, even though Candace is responsible.
I agree that it's trolling probably, but I don't 100% know. I don't know this guy.
Yeah, I mean, there are things in there that we're taking seriously and things in there that we're not. And he did say, I'm trying to bring everyone against each other. That's why I used a gun. So, and that part is like, the Candace Owens part is right before he's like, yeah, I was radicalized by Spyro the Dragon 3 or whatever video game. He was clearly joking in the very next paragraph after the Candace Owens. But I think there's still a point to be had, and it's kind of a fine one, and I don't know if I can make it very well, but in between, it's her fault and it's trolling. And that is that there's a reason she's the one person that he named. And I don't think the reason is as simple as that he doesn't like minorities or whatever people are saying. It's that they know, like, she is, at least in his mind and in the online mind, she's like the spark that lights everything on fire, right? Because she's so divisive. Mm-hmm. And part of why she's divisive is because she's completely full of crap. I mean, the things she says are like blatantly false almost all the time. They're just nuts. And so, and part of it is that she's like, I left the left, and she does the Blexit thing, and
Mm-hmm.
she plays that kind of reverse race card or whatever it is. Um, and so it's okay. So Candace Owens is named in that manifesto, and Eric and others are sort of friends with her. You know, Dave Rubin had said like a week before the shooting, like, Candace, it's about time to have you back on. I could be wrong slightly on the timing of that. It might
No,
have
I
been
think
after, but
that's
I think
right.
it's
Yeah.
right. And I don't know why we're not being more introspective, them, about, is this causing a real type of harm? You know, and another example is the Quebec. Maybe you know more about this. The Quebec mosque shooting.
I don't actually know a lot about that one.
Yeah, it was. What was it? It was in 2017. It might have been 2018. Um, you know, law enforcement somehow in their investigation they compiled this list of the favorite Twitter accounts of the shooter.
Okay.
And I don't know.
Oh, I think
like,
I do remember that, but I don't remember who it was.
Yeah, I don't now. I don't know what. Maybe he went to cute puppy pictures 500 times more than anything. I don't know what they cropped or how this list was made. But the list, you know, it's got your Stefan Molyneux. It's got a lot of those Tucker Carlson. I think. And if some of these are wrong, whatever. But I think that they're right. But the number one on the list by far was Ben Shapiro. Like, he went to Ben Shapiro's Twitter feed way more often. You know,
okay,
like,
people. Okay, I remember because Ben has talked about that.
Yeah, and like, again, Ben shouldn't be arrested and charged with murder. Like, nothing like that. But I feel like if I had engaged in certain rhetoric on that subject, which he has, and then someone did a mass murdering of people of that type, and I was their favorite person online, I would sort of expected someone to maybe take a minute and think about it. Now, he probably did in private, right? Wouldn't any of us? But the fact that this public persona has to be the eyebrows like this. It has to be like, ah, and it has to be like defiant. And I refuse to take any responsibility for this. Like, we need to start taking some responsibility for some of these things. We have to get our public intellectuals, these people that are so popular and have such a large following of really devoted people, and this certainly doesn't describe all their fans, but
it's very broad though, the fan base.
Economic band of young men, not totally at all. Look at you, like none of that, but like,
look at me.
Yeah, like not a young man. I don't know. I'm sorry to assume your gender.
I am a lady. Yep, I am a young lady.
Yeah. The only.
But how dare you assume my gender, sir?
How it's all incels. No,
how dare you assume my gender? Yeah.
You know, it's when you criticize them, I don't really feel like my mentions get flooded. It's okay. It's manageable. But it's just, there's this devotion. Like Eric will tweet something and you see these responses that are just like, you are the poet of our time, and it's just like that. I think that person is serious.
Okay. Yeah. So with regards to okay, say using Ben Shapiro as the example. See, I don't know if this is applicable and if it can be considered the same. So I would say I really like Ben Shapiro as a person. He's really, really, I mean, he's not as Republican as some, but he's just so Republican. Like, it's like, you know, I get it. That's where he is. That's what his show is. He's a Republican doing a show to other Republicans. And sometimes it's like, it's so, oh yeah, you hate the Dems. I get it, you know? So, which is fun. But I actually really like him as a person. I don't know why. There's something about him. I really like him. So I kind of feel like, but then someone gives a critique of him and I'm like, yeah, I can see that. But I actually just like him as a human being. I like what he's about. From what I've seen of other interviews of him, say when he's been on Joe Rogan, that in the past, and just seeing him chat with Jordan Peterson and, you know, whatever. So, okay. But then I don't know him personally, so it's not quite the same as when Eric does this. Well, I know Candace and I know Tucker. So it's not the same, but I kind of feel like it's a little bit similar with this. Well, you can like the person, but not like their rhetoric. Although I know with Candace, it's like so, I'd say it's far, far worse than Ben's personally. But is that kind of similar at all? Can you not just like a person even if you don't like the way that they spin their rhetoric, or you want to see critiques?
I guess
though?
in theory you can. I find it hard when a person's relationship to me as a member of the public and to them as a public figure is that they say rhetoric at my face. Like I don't know where those other things are. I mean, I've heard like nice anecdotes about things Ben has done like in a private way, you know, so I have no reason to think he's a bad guy. Like I'm sure he's nice to his friends and his family and all that stuff.
Well, the Mark Duplass thing, remember that? The Mark Duplass thing in the summer? Like, that was just, he wasn't even mad at Mark for denouncing him. He's like, yeah, I told him not to say that he talked with me. Like,
well,
Mark, so he was
Mark said you should follow Ben because
he's
a smart guy.
He apologized, for even saying or thinking. Okay, maybe he didn't apologize for thinking it, but he did apologize. So that kind of, I
actually criticized that a little bit. Because I was a little mad.
I wasn't friends with you at that time, so I did not.
Yeah, I was a little mad that. Why is Ben Shapiro the guy? Like that's sort of my problem. Is why is the IDW dominating this space so much? Like why is Ben Shapiro?
Isn't it the Pareto distribution where like the 10% gets the 90% of the?
Well. What axis are they the top 10? I mean, what is the quality? Like the rhetoric axis? You know, I don't really know
the centrist axis. The kind of right?
The what?
The centrist axis, even though I know Ben's on the right, but he's the only one officially on the right and the rest are more left of center.
I don't know.
The fair exchange, good faith arguments.
If I were going to tell someone, I don't know how many Republicans, if they were thinking, I'm not a Republican, but I don't know how many Republicans, who would I want to present my views to the other side? Would they pick Ben Shapiro? I mean, I don't think he's actually trying to really be that persuasive that often. I mean, he's sort of the originator of he and his fans, the originator of the like eviscerating Ben Shapiro, and it's some like violent verb. Violently,
I know.
A liberal. And it's just really more of this. Is this really what we're doing? Like, is everything like everything is a smackdown? Everything is like debate class in high school.
Okay, but I've seen him
Can we find better voices than this, please?
Okay, well, I've seen him give like you know, one of those commencement speeches at like a university or high school or something, and he did say at the end, like, you know I joke about the facts don't care about your feelings, but you do have to be kind to people or they won't listen to you. Like I've heard him say that. Yeah. So to be fair, I've heard him say that publicly, but maybe I think that what I'm getting from you for frustrations is a lack of introspection on the part of the IDW. And
publicly, at least. Maybe it's
public. Yes. Yeah. Okay, and a lack of. Okay, humility. Let's reorient here, guys, like that. So be like, okay, so these right figures that we do think they have the rights to say what they want to say, we don't dispute that, but we can say we don't like what they say. Like, so maybe that, like, because that's kind of what I'm getting, and that's kind of moving into the free speech. I think that's one of the things that you get frustrated with that I've seen, and that I'm starting to sort of understand as, okay, let's not conflate the two. I think we can say whatever we like because of, even though I don't have as free as speech laws as you guys do, we do have hate speech laws, so you have more freedom than I do. I better watch out. But anyways, but for you guys, with regards to, I know your law is better than my own, to be honest. But
no, this is what I'm starting to question.
The First Amendment. So you have the freedom to say what you like, but I don't have to like it. And so I think that we're not seeing IDW folks say, yeah, I didn't like that. That kind of right thing. Not even far right, but just kind of right leaning, like PewDiePie dressing up in a Nazi outfit.
Yeah.
Like, and I've even heard Joe Rogan defend him. Like Joe Rogan, because he goes from the side of a comic. And I see, and that's actually where I do sort of separate it, because I'm like, oh, comics, I kind of like, I don't want to censor them at all, because that's the point.
Yeah.
But they're funny, and if I laugh, then that's okay. I feel like that's my line. But for PewDiePie, it's not really funny. He's not a comedian. He's just trying to make people have a big response.
He sort of is, right? I mean, he's an entertainer. And
yes,
so
an entertainer, but he's not
yes,
but I don't feel like he's the same as, say, Joe Rogan in his comedy, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know. So
I think he's a good example of PewDiePie, though. I don't like watch his videos. I'm too old for that. But
I don't either.
You know.
Yeah.
But he's named in that video, and then I think he like wiped all his followers because of what we're about to talk about. But he didn't follow very many political pundits on Twitter, and like all the ones that he followed were Dave Rubin and onward. Like it was like really IDW centric and that's sort of what I'm talking about, in the sense that we're like redefining politics as this internet meme war sort of a thing, where all these people can be ostensibly on the left, and they'll say, I'm on the left, and that because I believe in gay marriage and I believe in smoking weed. And 99.9% of the time, they'll spend their time saying this right-wingers like should not be deplatformed or should not be silenced and blah blah blah,
because of the free speech thing. I know, but the freedom of speech, like that's and I do stand by that part, but I guess they could also say as a caveat, and I don't like what they said, by the way. Maybe
that would be nice, but but whenever it comes time to say that, it's like I don't really know what he said.
Well, I've heard, okay, because I listen to Joe Rogan like pretty religiously.
Yeah.
So he has said, you know, I've heard him actually be maybe the most critical.
Joe Rogan is a special case in the IDW. I said this, you might not have been on Twitter yet. Joe Rogan is actually the person who best establishes the values of what I want the IDW to be. Like Joe Rogan is extremely humble. He doesn't think he knows anything. He questions himself all the time. He's super empathic. Like he's actually really good at being like, someone will say something during one of his podcasts, and he'll be like, yeah, but if you think about it from their point of view, and then he just like nails them with that, right? Like there are a lot of really good. Joe Rogan is like not my problem, except to the extent of his audience just being so huge.
Wait, what's wrong with that?
Well, he's so curious. Again, it's this fact that like the entire discussion is sort of on this axis of like radical conspiracy theory weirdness. You know, like he has like a 3-hour Alex Jones podcast, and everyone's kind of laughing about it and laughing at Alex Jones, but he's kind of also trying to sort of like rehabilitate Alex Jones a little bit. And I mean, it's not like there are going to be fewer people going to Infowars.com or whatever after that episode. You know, it all has this effect.
Well, he's like, it's my friend.
Well, and he'll have Abby Martin on. I think that's her name. She's like radical leftist, like Russia Today or whatever. I mean, he will go all over the place.
Yeah, he does. Yeah.
But very, very few people have as wide of a, you know, Dave Rubin's like, he can try to pull like, I don't know, Margaret Cho or the two people on the left that he's ever talked to out or whatever. But
well, he's talked to, I think, Thaddeus Russell before.
Well, Thaddeus Russell is one of those.
He's more libertarian, I guess.
Yeah, he's one of those like what's his thing, the Rebel University or whatever it's called.
I don't know.
He's one of those anti-establishment people. I mean, it's sort of what I'm trying to do, I guess. I don't know. Is I'm seeing politics as changing on social media from a left-right, policy-oriented world to a sort of burn it down, don't burn it down, establishment, anti-establishment kind of an axis. And that's sort of where you get your horseshoe theory, where the far left and the far right are kind of working toward the same ends. And I think the IDW is accelerating all of that. Like, I think they are on the Trumpian side, at least just as far as like weakening institutions, weakening professional norms, weakening all these things. And I don't think we're in a super good position to try to sort these things out.
Yeah, okay. I've seen Brett Weinstein talk about the fact that he was in one of these institutions, at Evergreen for I think 25 years.
Yeah.
Defending how can we keep these things around without burning them to the ground? Because I have tried, and look what happened. So I don't know how to counter that.
Which is
what?
Like, he was at the kookiest institution. Like, it's kind of funny. It's like, what were you doing there for so long then? Like, that's have you heard about
I think the STEM. I think STEM was quite separate from their social sciences. That's how he could be there for that long. I think
he just chose a professor, and you just like take all their classes and go sit in a park, and I don't know what.
Yeah, and that's the model, and that's what I've heard him and Heather talk about, how they love that model, and I like that. I would do that.
I can't imagine a professor. I don't want to just internalize all their ideology, though. I think you need to hear a lot of different things. But
okay. So, but regardless, we're going back to seeing someone who said, "Oh, I've been in the institution for this long, and it can't be reformed."
Yeah.
The far left, like that far left, because this is the thing we're talking about more of a center thing, and if we were talking about the far left, you would have critiques of that as well. It's not like you're...
Oh, yeah.
Yes, right, because that's one of the reasons why I liked your takes, because you're not choosy in who you criticize.
No.
Because you don't... That's what I think your Twitter bio says. It's like, no sacred cows.
Right.
No sides. I give free for all for whatever. So I do like that about... but for them, they're like, this is our world. The academia is our world, and it's so... Like, I mean, I see James Lindsay talking with all these, like, crazy feminists and, like, postmodernists. Like, he's trying, on Twitter, he's trying to talk... Like, I actually do, because I do look at he is, like, trying to explain in good faith with these people until then I see the sarcasm comes out, because he's like, I can't. Like, but he's trying so hard. I can see it, So I do see, I see why they're going, like, it's a pendulum. Like they're in a pendulum of swinging from the left through the center over to say hi to Ben Shapiro. So,
and that's maybe a good point to sort of say something that aligns me more with them. I'm pretty much totally support the SoCal Squared grievance studies project. I think James and Helen, I don't really know what Peter's role is too much. I don't see him on Twitter as much, but I know James and Helen are fighting the good fight, in my opinion. I mean, think about what they did. If anything they say is to be believed, and their papers are proof of it, they spent like full weeks, like 50-hour weeks or whatever, for months and months and months learning this stuff. Like, no one has ever taken a thing as seriously as they did it. And people can quibble with whether it's like IRB, like whether it was like proper under the terms of review board ethics, and whether it was an audit study or whatever he wants to. But I think they did something really neat. I think it's sort of amazing what they pulled off. I think they're the kind of serious people I wish we had more of in that space, actually. That they are. Their scholarship is good, solid. They really are anti-BS, no matter where it comes from. And that's my problem, is the extent to which the BS has sort of crept in, or always was part of what the IDW is doing. I think if you've got the winning argument, go ahead and make it. If you can't make it in a way that's like fair and honest, then maybe you don't have it. So.
See, you don't think that they're being fair? I should have said this at the beginning. I know it's not necessarily fair. Like, they can't answer back, so like we're just speculating. So I don't want to, if they were here, any of them, the ominous them, if any of them, I do think that they would answer in good faith and consider and or disagree, but again, explain. I do think that that's the kind of people that they are, But Ed?
Well, I mean, if you want to move to free speech a little bit, since we were sort of talking about that stuff,
Yeah.
we could.
Yeah.
I know you made a video about some of the stuff that I tweeted and some of the broader questions about it.
Okay.
And we can there's kind of the broader picture, which is how everything is turning into this free speech conception of looking at the world. And then there's the sort of more narrow, the Tucker Carlson and whatnot.
Yes,
so,
I think that we kind of agree, though, about like that Voltaire quote that's not even from Voltaire, apparently.
Yeah.
That I shared the other day. I think it's like might not like what you have to say, but I'll defend to the death your right to say it, and I think that the defend to the death gets really highlighted, and the I may not like what you have to say doesn't get said. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's moving into the situation with Tucker Carlson and even kind of with James Gunn. I mean, he's been reinstated now as director for
Right. Yeah.
for his movie, and so but getting crucified for things you said in the past. And I kind of agreed that it just seems the way in which you get called out, having such a bad faith way of finding your past sins.
Yeah.
That really rubs me the wrong way. But then I think you said, well, if you're going to talk big, you're going to go down big from the talking big.
Pretty much. That's what I was trying to figure out with Tucker when I was thinking about it. And I kept like writing an article and kind of rewriting it and being like, what am I doing? And ultimately, though, I think we can't have, if we have a blanket rule that nothing anyone ever says in the past beyond a certain point can ever affect them in terms of employment or whatever, I feel like that's just accelerating us toward this culture where everyone just says whatever they want in a bad way, like where everyone is trying to be as provocative as possible, where nobody cares if what they're saying is really true, where we're kind of immunizing people like Tucker Carlson. And then the next person who replaces him is going to be worse than him, and the next person that replaces them is going to be worse. And we just become this like awful wolves baying at each other kind of a culture, right? So, I mean, it's so tantalizing to say, let's be principled, don't ever let this hurt anyone's employment or whatnot. But thinking about it with Tucker Carlson. So this guy is who he is, the rich and famous person he is, because he's able to evoke a certain amount of outrage, but not too much. Like he's like an outrageologist, right? He has this perfect way of like nailing how much he's allowed to say and never saying less, because then he's boring and his ratings go bad, and never saying more because then a kerfluffle breaks out and his sponsors quit and all that stuff. Well, if you think of it that way, which seems to be a pretty accurate representation of Tucker's kind of a shock jock himself in the same way Bubba the Love Sponge is. Him messing up and going over the bar is just him being bad at his job.
Okay.
Like, that's what Tucker Carlson failing at his job looks like, is saying something sometime that will eventually get him into trouble, because he's dining out on the fact that he can say things that aren't getting him in trouble. So if we just have this like asymmetrical standard where Tucker Carlson is only allowed to benefit from veiled bigotry or not so veiled bigotry and never have consequences from it, I don't think that's really the standard that we want.
Well, I don't know enough about him to say if I'm like, maybe he isn't, maybe that's not what he's doing with regards to veiled big, like, I don't know, because maybe someone who knows him better could. So to be fair, I'm like, I don't know, like maybe.
And that's why, you got to look at other factors, like how long ago was the thing that they said and where were they then?
I think it was like over 10 years ago.
It was over 10 years. But in some sense, that's different from someone who was a 14-year-old 10 years ago.
Yeah.
He was, I think he was in his 30s, and he was on a public radio show because people wanted to hear him say stuff like that, because that was his job already. Okay, so that's just a consideration. What about
the way it got pulled up from the, Media Matters, right?
That's another thing.
What about that? Like, that part makes me want to overlook what was said, because it seems so. That's where in my video, I was so divided, because I was like, yeah, I don't like this, but then the way they did it was so bad, it makes me just not want to care what was said, and just be like, he could say anything. Like, not really, but...
I'm excited about that too. It's sort of the way I think about it. We have this rule. It's based on the Fourth Amendment called the exclusionary rule, where if a police officer searches and takes some evidence, but they do it in an unconstitutional way, it all gets thrown out.
Mm-hmm.
And
so it's like getting a warrant.
Yeah, and just following the rules in some way, not acting in bad faith or whatever would be the analogy. And so the analogy here is Media Matters is a pure leftist organization whose whole job is to dig through these archives and try to find something to ruin someone on the right's life. And because of that, we shouldn't care about what they find. And there's some legitimacy to that argument for sure, right? The other side of it would be, well, so what did they uncover? Did they uncover a secretly recorded telephone conversation between Tucker Carlson and one of his friends,
No.
privately? No, they uncovered talking on a radio station to a shock jock type person. So there wasn't any real deviance in what they got. They didn't spy on him and drill a hole through the wall and put a microphone in there or something like that. So it's more like their motive is what we're worried about. And I'm just trying to imagine a world in which we don't have the Media Matters. I mean, are they going to disappear if Tucker Carlson gets fired? No, because even if he doesn't get fired, they still dominated the media, didn't they? And they still got everyone to click on their articles or whatever it is and made their money. So the fact that they're inevitable, in my mind, that there will be an organization like that, if we're going to just exclude everything they find, how do we not just end up in this world where we're not punishing them for anything that they say anymore? It's sort of the same thing. James Gunn, the bad tweets were found, he said something about one of Mike Cernovich's friends or something, and so Mike Cernovich went and found the bad tweets. And is Mike Cernovich not a big enough entity for that rule to apply, or does he have to have 501c3 tax exempt status? I don't really quite understand.
I don't know what that means because
well, they're a nonprofit, Media Matters.
Okay.
That's why it makes some people mad. In part is the idea that they're not paying taxes in order to do this.
Oh, they're not. Okay, but I don't like what they do though. I don't like that.
Yeah, but do you think that? So people like David French and some others have. This is where there's this kind of alliance between the right and the IDW. This notion that there's this outrage culture, and they're calling it fake outrage, as if people aren't actually angry about it. And that's another argument to think about in the sense of, well, it wasn't enough to get him fired 10 years ago or 12 years ago. Of course, there wasn't Twitter, so these kind of things, people just, not everyone listened to Bubba the Love Sponge, and so nothing happened. But I don't think it's fair to say that people aren't actually mad at someone saying that Iraqis are primitive monkeys. I mean, what is that? We're going to act like it's all fake outrage now that no one actually cares about these things. I think that's a disingenuous way of looking at it.
Well, it could depend, though, because look at the Smirkgate situation with the Covington boys.
Yeah.
That was, I would say that was, I don't know if I would call it fake, but that was foolishness. The way that people went after that kid on, like that. So what it seems like is there's always a kernel of truth. There is legitimate fake outrage, I guess. And then
there's dumb outrage.
Yes, yeah.
But I don't know if it's fake, right?
Okay, so it's dumb outrage. So it's not fake, I guess. That's it's the fake news kind of thing left over from Trump's, Apparently Hillary said that. Apparently Hillary was the first to coin the phrase fake news.
That's true. Fake news first was coined there was these actually people in Romania or somewhere in Eastern Europe that were actually churning out fake news stories as their job. And that's what fake news started out as. And then the right picked it up in this kind of brilliant rhetorical move, honestly.
Yeah.
And repurposed it and just made it every story we don't like is fake news.
Fake news.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
It's the same with fake outrage. Well, it's not
it's
fake.
not fake. You're right. You're right. Okay, so it's not fake, but dumb. So there's a lot of dumb outrage.
The Covington outrage was dumb.
It was. And so then everything gets called dumb if there is outrage that seems like it's making something a bigger deal than it would have been before Twitter. I think that's all the outrage that we see. I've had someone actually I've had someone mention this in a thread or in a like a back and forth on Twitter, and I wasn't even necessarily disagreeing. I was kind of thinking, oh, that's an interesting idea. It's not fake. It's just each individual putting it out there, and there happens to be a number of individuals putting it out there.
Yeah.
So hence, well, that's what mobbing happens as well. Although sometimes that's different when people like call out for if they have a big following and they say followers get them, you know, like that's kind of like
it's implied sometimes.
To the Batmobile, you know, like we're gonna get them. So that I guess is kind of a separate part of mobbing. But like the outrage, it is real as long as you're logged on and then you leave and you don't really think about it anymore. Is it that right?
It's just two sides of the same force though. Like the outrage force, the outrage mob is the same principle of amplifying feelings as the positive retweet group is. We just don't call that a mob, you know.
It's nice.
It's all leveraging this structure of Twitter and how it makes all these things possible, right? Well, part of the problem is, like you say, we can just log off, and we can, but the media has thoroughly bought into this notion that everything that happens on Twitter is just as real life as anything else. It's a lot easier to report on that kind of stuff. It doesn't drain your budget as much, and that's another big problem. In which case, I sort of agree with the IDW about in a lot of ways. Is this notion that the media has decided that everything that happens on Twitter is completely real. You know, it's like a few years ago, some crazy story would happen on Twitter, and I'd be talking to a friend, and they'd be like, "Oh, Twitter's not real," and I would even say it, "Twitter, it's not real life. It doesn't matter." Like that's over now. I mean,
it is real now. It kind of is real.
It's all real now because the media wants it to be real, so it's all real. You know, I mean, what do we hear about AOC if not for Twitter? But she's in everybody's living rooms now, you know.
She's cutting up squash and making smoothies. Yeah.
She has a smoothie make. Oh, I missed that.
No. You didn't see that one?
No.
Oh, it was great. It was an Instagram live feed. I think
I'm out on her. I don't like squash. No, get out.
Okay. No, okay. So I don't know if it was from Instagram, but it looked like that, and someone recorded it and put it over on Twitter. So like my feed for days, 2 days or so, was just her talking and trying it out, putting it in the blender. Guys, I think this is when she's talking anti-natalist stuff, talking about like, oh, we need to stop having so many kids and So and I know that because of Twitter. Yeah, I'm in the know now.
Guess who dominates Twitter? It's really, really young people, right? Like. That's another thing is you can't tell the person whether they're 19 years old or 29 or 39. And with this loss of these gatekeepers that used to kind of funnel better ideas into society, right? And they would also do bad things like keep minorities and women and other people's ideas out of society. We got rid of all these gatekeepers at once in a way now. And so who's burst through the gates are like these like 22-year-old bloggers,
but we do know how old they are if they have a profile picture.
Well, they rarely do, don't they?
You think? Oh, is it all anonymous? Are you thinking?
I don't know. It's a lot. That's another thing. I know we didn't like discuss it, but I always thought it would be really bad to end anonymity on Twitter, and now I'm kind of in the middle on it. Like I might like something where if it was like Twitter knows you're a person, but you don't have to say what person you are.
Yeah. Which
has all these like data breach and all these potential bad ramifications too, because like Twitter's not very well designed or run. But I don't know. It might be worth some kind of, when we're talking about free speech, what kind of things could we change to try to make the discourse better without silencing anyone necessarily? Maybe something like that, where you're not saying you have to use your real name in a real picture, but there's someone on the back end somewhere who knows that you are real.
And to get rid of potential like bots and whatever else that is, and make people be a little bit more accountable, maybe knowing that Twitter knows who they are. But
if we don't trust them to steward that data, in a fair way, it's always just kind of going back to all that stuff where, I mean, can I say Twitter's going to do a good job administering that?
Probably not.
No.
Well, okay, so the thing that I'm thinking about going back to what you were saying about the kind of the Tucker Carlson kind of line that he follows of not too much but not too little, and that reminds me even particularly about Twitter and how they and Facebook and other social media platforms, the things that gain a response are, I think, angry things. And so, I mean, I know it sounds kind of like duh. I'm like, I think it's like anger, but no, it is, but it more so than positive. I know, more than positive things. Angry gets more likes. Outrageous things get more likes and more comments and more retweets. So, if that's what makes you successful, and I try to hold away from that when I try to not be like, hey, will this get likes? Like, I try not to think that when I'm tweeting things. And sometimes I like do a super positive thing and like, nothing. Well,
someone says something nice to you and and you're like, aw.
People say nice things all the time. Oh yeah,
oh, well, lucky you.
No, but people say nice things to me all the time though, because I'm so nice. I've cultivated what?
I should try to be nice.
You should. Okay, but like, so the thing is about, so I try not to be too, like, run by that. Because I know sometimes I get frustrated, and not often, but I'm like, oh, this. And then, like, a lot of people resonated with them. And so I get a reward for that, like, oh, I should be more frustrated on Twitter more often. And so I mean, I almost can't, I don't want to say I can't blame, but I can see why these people write provocative statements and provocative things. Even the Candace Owenses and the Tucker Carlsons, I see why they do it. I'm not saying I agree with it, but they are successful because of that side of human nature that draws us to their intents. By us, I mean the people who are in their tribes.
Yeah.
Draws them. See, that's the thing for me. I'm trying to be a lot more. We don't have to be like that. So here I'm gonna write some positive things, or things that I read a lot of questions, and I try not to just be like, so what's your favorite color? Like I try to be more, have more depth and be like, oh, okay, I've been thinking, and then what do you guys think about this? And I didn't even give I gave zero example there. Okay, what's a good example? I think I even said about, I don't like provocateurs. I've been thinking, I don't like them. And I got quite a few responses, and some of them were not necessarily agreeing with me. But and I was like, no, I'm not saying limit their freedoms to speak. I just don't like them. I don't like it. I don't like the role of provocateur. And people gave some reasons why maybe it is good to have a provocateur in society. Okay, maybe that. So I learned a few things.
Yeah.
So.
Well, was Christopher Hitchens? My goodness, was he not a provocateur?
I don't actually know much about him.
Oh yeah, but then. And here's how quickly, though, it falls off, is that Bill Maher got crushed because he said that Milo was like a young gay Christopher Hitchens. And it's like...
He did?
That's really wrong comparison. But the fact that that's the name that you would pick sort of shows how we're just kind of in provocateur world now.
Yeah.
And my point with Tucker is that if a provocateur can only live by the sword of provocateurism...
They can never die by the. Oh, I saw that.
What are we gonna have? Where are we gonna be? Like.
Yeah.
And I think I understand why people, especially people who talk for a living and type things for a living and go on podcasts for a living, I understand why they're so concerned about, whether it's actual free speech, First Amendment, or free speech in terms of Patreon shutting you down, Twitter banning you, and all that.
Mm-hmm.
But we've got to be able to come at this in a way where we're not really just promoting like a world of everyone shit talking and only a world of provocateurs.
Mm-hmm.
Like I went back and forth. In some sense, I don't even think anything should happen to Tucker Carlson because I have no reason to think that whoever replaces him isn't going to be twice as bad.
Mm.
Because why wouldn't they be?
They're successful. They make it. That's so.
Yeah.
See, now we're just talking about problems.
Are we
with
sure Candace Owens wouldn't be the one on Fox if Tucker Carlson got fired?
I know she probably would be the replacement. So like we're the ones not coming up with the answer. Like we're you were mentioning about like the IDW. Oh well, what do we replace it with? Well, we're just talking about the problems and like okay, well, who do we replace the intense provocateuring personalities with? Because that's who's successful. So what's the answer then?
Well, okay.
I ask you, what is the answer?
What? Let me solve everything here. You try to promote voices that are a little less in that space. So who are IDW adjacent people?
Adjacent, yes.
Adjacent. It's all about, or tangential.
Okay.
Like Alice Dreger. Awesome.
I've never heard. Oh, okay.
Oh yeah, she was invited by Barry Weiss or whoever was involved to be part of that piece, and she like straight up rejected it because she just thought it was all kind of silly and didn't think that a group like that should like have a name and be a thing, like a tribe like that.
Okay.
She has a really cool book called Galileo's Middle Finger. She was on
the Femsplainers.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, because she was interviewed by those ladies.
So she's like, the media is doing a real bad job. So what does she do? She like founds her own local newspaper in East Lansing, Michigan, and they're like doing investigative work. I mean, she is the real deal. She's awesome. Okay. But she's not on Twitter dunking on people. So, like there's not as much to tweet and retweet and whatever.
Not on Twitter like us dunking on people.
Yeah, I mean, there's like, or John Haidt,
Yes, like, I do quite like Jonathan Haidt.
There's a lot of people like that.
But he is on Twitter, though.
Yeah, he is.
And every time I often tag him and his colleague, Greg Lukianoff, I talk about their book a lot because it has to do with kids, with regards to coddling the American mind. So I every time I have this sort of, like, I feel like making my 2-year-old hang up his coat and line up his boots.
Put him on the subway, whatever.
But I did write that about my 2-year-old, and I said I feel like Greg and John would be proud, and I tagged them, and then they liked it, and I think that Greg wrote me back, like Greg wrote about his kids, and so I mean they're on Twitter, but they're doing it, they're not dunking on people.
And another thing, we got to talk about what we're going to do with social media. We have to.
Yes.
I don't think we can just let it run free. So what happens is this is kind of like
it's its own
no
thing.
regulation and nothing. Just like whatever Jack Dorsey, like whenever he comes back from his silent retreat in Nepal and has some thought, like we're just gonna have to deal with it, because what happens is that's fine if we have the First Amendment and it's pretty lenient, especially in America it is. Mm-hmm. But if Twitter decides tomorrow that sort of like they're sort of doing with misgendering or with learn to code. Yeah. If they just decide that certain things are going to get you banned from Twitter, to the extent that Twitter is such a huge and ever-growing mode of communication, it's becoming the public square in my mind.
It is, yeah.
And an economic avenue for so many people who are trying to promote themselves, that basically Twitter's terms of service effectively become our free speech laws. Mm-hmm. If we're, and so we've got to figure out what we're going to do about it, because in that sense, I sort of align with the IDW, but I feel like they are on the side that we should just do nothing.
I don't think so. I don't think they've articulated what to do.
Oh, this is what's coming soon.
Yeah, okay, when I get bigger, I'm going to talk with them. Yeah. And we'll see.
No, that'd be awesome, and I bet that'll happen.
Someday, But if you're watching IDW, I love you still.
There you go. Andrea's still with you.
No,
I'm
you're
I'm
no,
with
you
you
could
enough
have your
to
mind
criticize
changed.
you. If I just didn't care, I just wouldn't say anything.
It's true. I think that there's nothing wrong with critiques in good faith, and I actually think I tweeted. I don't know if it was you, but I think it was something that your critiques. I think I had it as sort of in the back of my mind. I tweeted out that if someone who criticizes you in good faith is your closest ally, and I spelled ally wrong. I spelled ally instead of ally. But Brett retweeted that, and it's my highest liked tweet ever. But
yeah, see, they're suckering you in. They're just
no, sir. It was a good tweet, but it's true. But it is true though. That's why I think it caught attention, because it's true. Yeah. That's why I wanted to talk with you, because I might not necessarily agree with you. I can see where you're coming from. I can see where those criticisms are coming from, because I mean, maybe they're doing things behind the scenes that they're like, well, we don't want to talk about it if it falls through. So, who knows? Who knows? There are things that we don't know that could be in the works, or they're like, yeah, maybe we should talk about those things, and maybe we do have a blind spot there. I don't know, but I do think that my idea of a good faith argument has come, well, in part, like, say, watching them speak with people on. There are times where there are debates between people on of the IDW and people from the far left, and I do think that they hold themselves with, I guess, dignity and grace without just, well, they don't go, hey, they don't go for.
We just use the word grace to describe the IDW. Oh.
Hey, when I see somebody, when I've seen some of the footage from Evergreen, and the way that the people are screaming in Brett Weinstein's face, and he is talking to them at like a very controlled level, and that wasn't even a proper debate. And I have seen some debates, but that's not even the example I'll use, because this wasn't even a proper. This wasn't even as bad. This wasn't even as like, I know that Jordan Peterson was called by what's his name, like a mean, mad white man. Like, even that was not in good faith at all. But this was another level of being mobbed and still keeping. That's what I had in my head when I said grace and dignity, because I'm like,
absolutely, then
I don't think I could hold my cool having like vitriol. Like, you could see it, and I have trouble watching it. Because, and so I try to do other things because I watched Mike Nenya's thing recently, and the last second installment of, I think there's one more installment, and it's just so horrific to see, and he's just so like stoic in a good way, and so maybe that's what I see when I think of the IDW is that's kind of the image I get. So.
Yeah, and someone can have that image, and then someone can have an image of just Dave Rubin being like, all my critics are haters and losers, and the truth is somewhere in the middle, right?
Okay.
I just think, can we just remember policy like a little bit? Like,
okay, so what do you mean by policy? Like, so you said that actually at the beginning. I should have asked, what do you mean by policy?
I mean, things like healthcare, the environment, corporate regulation, taxation, criminal justice, civil rights, campaign finance reform, right? Free speech, but it's just one of them. Due process, everything, right? And this whole notion that, and this is a big bullet point with the IDW, in my opinion, which is that the people on the left treated me horribly, and so I'm not on the left anymore, right? And I don't understand that, in the sense that you can yell at me on Twitter all you want, but I'm not going to decide that I think climate change is a hoax. It doesn't, like, they're not the same thing. And
well, some of them still say that they're on the left. Like, I have heard both Weinstein brothers be like, no, I'm still left.
Yeah, I mean, Eric supported Bernie in the primaries, as far as I know. And so if you are still on the left,
Well, only
Maybe
Dave has
every
said
once
I've
in
left
a
the
while.
left, though. Only
Huh?
Dave has said, sorry, I'm talking over you. I'm getting too excited.
No,
So
no, no.
only Dave has said I've left the left. I don't think anyone else has said I've left the left.
And for about a year or two, he claimed he was the last liberal on the left, and then it became classical liberal,
Yeah.
which means libertarian.
Okay.
And then he endorsed Gary Johnson, and then he unendorsed Gary Johnson, and then like he's all over the place. And this is a guy who used to be on the far left,
Yeah.
you know, the Young Turks and all that. Can we just see a little bit more reflection of what actually motivates people to vote? And can we maybe suggest that it should be based on thinking about the people who aren't on Twitter, who need a leg up and who are being hurt by what's going on in the world, and not so much that we're just having this like online, massively multiplayer online role-playing game like war with each other on Twitter.
Okay, so I see that.
Yeah.
Like, the thing is so many people are writing them saying, hey, I'm out in the world and you've encouraged me. You know,
Yeah.
that's actually why I started my channel, was because I watched a panel at Portland State University back when Peter, it was before all this, the hoax came out and whatnot. But so Peter was there, and Christina Hoff Sommers and Brett and Heather were there, and they talked about the things they talked about made me feel like, oh, there's so many people in the silent majority. They receive so many letters of people saying, or in person, you know, saying, I can't speak up. Thank you for speaking up on our behalf. And so I was like, oh, well, I am a stay-at-home mom and I have just kids and I'm not going to worry about being fired. So maybe I'll start doing this in this space, you know? So I do think that there might be stuff outside of Twitter that we don't see, of people saying, I'm encouraged by these people because I thought I was crazy. I'm in school right now. I have professors telling me that I need to get rid of my implicit bias because of my whiteness that I've internal, you know, whatever. And oh, I'm not a bad person because or oh, I don't need to be a victim because I'm a person of color. So I think that lots of people are writing them that maybe we're not seeing that, because I've heard them say that on occasion.
I mean, I know that's happening a lot, and it's. I mean, I remember taking like Anthropology 101 in undergrad, like in like 2005 or something, and it was all about ethnocentrism, and that was like one of the precursors of a lot of this stuff. And you don't hear that word anymore. It's weird, but I think maybe it's just what white privilege is called now or something.
Right.
You know, part of trying to figure out what is and isn't a problem is like everything's a really large number. Like there are so many people in the world to start. There are so many people on Twitter. There are so many people who are loud on Twitter. There are there will be, I'm sure there are thousands of people sending them emails all the time. But now we have this other number of how many thousand who aren't having the experience and we don't know. You know, I think about, I don't know if you saw that Hidden Tribes report that came out. I think Yasha Monk was promoting it. It was about, you know, what really blew up about it was that like the majority of people that aren't on the far left claimed that they view political correctness negatively.
Yes,
people
yeah.
Whether
oh,
like,
I did see that, yeah.
Political correctness or whatever. But what I really thought was interesting is they put everyone into like 7 different tribes, and the far left tribe was the progressive activists, and they determined, I don't know their methodology, whatever, but they determined that it was either 7 or 8% is all that this is, right?
The silent, or the no, sorry, the
so
vocal
the
minority.
silent majority there is actually the people who aren't on the far left. I mean, there's another silent majority of people who just go to work and don't care about any of this stuff, and luckily aren't currently in college or certain fields, and they don't have to deal with it all the time, right? So it's kind of good to just sort of be a counterweight and be like, okay, campus free speech is a problem, but let's not let campus free speech become, it shouldn't be like the reason you vote for Donald Trump or the reason that you don't vote for the Democrat or something like that. I don't think. Now, people will disagree with that. That's fine. You know,
and the way that the Democrats are going, having like AOC be their darling and trying to kind of almost like it feels like she's not running, I know, because she's too young, but it feels like some.
Oh my God.
It feels like some of the older. I shouldn't say older because there's some ladies. Some of the more senior people who are running are saying, "Oh, that's what gets a lot of Twitter a buzz. Let's try to be more like that." And they're running on this identitarian sort of like slave reparations. What?
That got the loudest noise that you've made. Okay.
Okay.
No, I agree.
It's because it's ridiculous.
But it's such a common thing, though, that when you're in the primaries, you move to the wing, and then when you're in the general, you move to the center, right? I mean, there's 15...
maybe I haven't paid attention enough to the primaries versus the general, so...
Yeah, I mean, who knows what's still true, because everything is changing so quickly.
Yeah.
But that's a common axiom of American politics, is this is what happens. And you got to kind of stake out your space among 20 or however many people there are in there right now.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm hopeful that we're not going to be at November 1st, 2020, and whoever's the nominee is going to be like, reparations, right? Because then we're having Trump for 4 more years for sure.
Yes.
But it's just, it all goes back to this idea. Like, I think the greatest bias in the media is not left or right. It is the bias towards things that pop. It is bias towards stories.
Yeah.
And so that's where everything is provocative. And, well, if I say reparations would be good, I'm getting in the news, right? Yeah, all right, let's go. And
it's rather disingenuous.
Normalize the discussion, right? Because, I'm sitting here trying to think about, we could have another episode about reparations, but I can't think of anything that would get us closer to an actual civil war or some type of schism in society than what I understand reparations would actually be. I mean, if we're talking about you're actually just taking money. Now, there's a lot of other ways that it can be done, and so that's not necessarily the case. But and then after that, what? Everyone is going to say, well, we did reparations, so now there's no more racism in the world, which is stupid. No, but
it'll never, because you can't control people's thoughts.
And that's kind of a mess.
Sorry, well, I didn't mean to bring it up, but that's what the Dems are kind of like. If you start running on identitarian sort of platforms, that will drive your voters away to think, oh, I can't vote for them. They're with the identity politics guys. So.
But that's the little move though that the IDW does. If I can still just keep kind of digging. Like,
no, but I want to hear that because that kind of makes an if-then thing for me.
This notion, this is how we got Trump thing, right? That's basically a meme, and the way that it works is someone on the left says something crazy, whether it's Elizabeth Warren or whoever coming out for reparations or whatever it is, and then Ben Shapiro or somebody tweets, well, 4 more years to Trump if you keep talking like this, right? Mm-hmm. And it's this framing that basically like Republicans are fallen people who behave terribly, and people on the left are virtuous and supposed to behave better, and every time one of them messes up, and we're talking about millions of people on Twitter, so there's always going to be a stupid leftist tweet that's going viral. Always. It'll never not be happening. There's just too many people on Twitter, and too many of them are stupid. It's the same with the left. It's the same with the right. So this trope where you look at whatever the day's bad leftist tweet is, and you say, this is how we got Trump, you're planting in people's mind this idea that it's okay to vote for Trump as long as that keeps happening. And it's never going to stop happening because there's too many people on Twitter.
Okay, but there are some things that did make us get Trump, though.
I mean, everyone's pet thing is what they think made us get Trump. I don't know. It's hard to say what made us get Trump, right?
Okay.
I would say anointing Hillary like 10 years ago to be the next candidate.
Yeah, Hillary. I kind of think that's it.
Yeah,
Hillary is why we have Trump.
I'm in the Bernie would have won camp, but
I kind of was too. But now I'm afraid that he's too.
I don't know what to think about him now. Yeah,
he's a little too. I don't know.
Well, and that's another thing the left is doing is you're gonna who's polling at the top? It's 2 white men, right? It's Biden, and even though he's not even in the race, I think, and Bernie. and there's going to be a huge fight among the left because they're going to, they're already saying it. You can't nominate a white man this time. And what's going to happen to the left about that? And then everyone on the right says this is how you get Trump because you always fight with each other. And it's like, let's just de-escalate this, right? People are saying crazy things because Twitter incentivizes saying crazy things. The media incentivizes saying crazy things. Everyone incentivizes saying crazy things, but we don't have to become crazy.
Okay, yes.
Have to become crazy.
That's how we're gonna end this. Is be kind if you're on Twitter. Be kind if you're off of Twitter.
Do as I say, not as I do.
Oh no, I do. I do be kind.
Yeah,
it's my mission.
I try.
Just tweet about more funny, comical. What was that one thing you did? Oh, about how I do the traffic lights. Like click the traffic lights in each section so we know you're
the CAPTCHA.
So that we know that you're a real person. That was so funny. And it was funny, but it was outrageous, but it was funny. So if people want to do more, like, if you want to be like, oh, I got to rage against something, do it against a silly household. I hate it when I have to, what is it called? CAPTCHA?
CAPTCHA, yeah.
Okay.
It's like a play on capture.
Yeah, do that. Put it towards that instead of politics. Or just like be nice, like be kind to people and be like, hey,
and sometimes let's be serious adults about politics and think about all the people offline who have real problems. And a lot of us online have real problems too. But politics is really about trying to make a better life for everybody. It's not about an online video game.
Oh, I didn't know.
Yeah.
Okay, I think this is a good place to end. So thank you for this wonderful chat.